Hi, I'm Kent.
And I'm Anna.
And this is episode 8 of Film and Family, a podcast for filmmakers and professionals in the entertainment and film industries who want to experience deeper joy and satisfaction in their film and family lives.
Let's jump right in.
So today we want to talk about expectations. When to have them.
When to drop them. But you didn't expect that.
Okay, well, anyway. Okay, so why do we think this is such an important topic? I think because it will make a really big difference in our careers and in our lives and in our families, and especially in our families.
So I think a lot of times we believe that either you have high expectations and you're just going to be disappointed all the time, or you have no expectations and then you have no influence.
But you spare yourself the pain of having those expectations and feeling disappointed. So which is better? It
kind of seems like a lose-lose.
Yeah, which is better? Because I remember growing up, I had a friend who was like, you just shouldn't have expectations of other people. I remember thinking, that seems unreasonable to me. I don't know. So, but then I think it's also obvious to many of us that we're like, but we're often disappointed when we hold people with high expectations, right? So,
and this is true of ourselves as well, our expectations of ourselves and our own improvement and progress.
Yeah. So, yeah, I hadn't thought about that actually before. Prepping for the episode, that's a problem I think I felt with myself a lot, is that I hold myself to really high expectations. I think a lot of us do. And we get really frustrated with ourselves and feel disappointed in ourselves. And so should we not have expectations for ourselves? I want to start with this quote, and we'll jump off there and kind of go over. He mentions 4 things, and we'll touch on each one right after.
Well, the context of the quote, first of all, is that in our church we do a lot of teaching. It's all volunteer. And so this was a training for church teachers. And one of the, I don't actually know who he is.
So Chad H. Webb is over the church education systems. He works in that department. He's quoting Elder Neil L. Anderson, who's a leading member of the church. So the quote is, "When we lead and teach without love and have low expectations, we encourage deviance. High expectations without love fosters rebellion. High love, but low expectations creates a feeling of fraternity, but little progression. However, high love and high expectations creates miracles. That is the type of love the Savior has. And it is the type of love we must have if we are to make a difference in the lives of our students." So that's the end of the quote regarding teachers in the church. But let's look at this and look at the sort of the 4 options. He's kind of created a little chart. You can almost imagine it in your mind when he says it, right? There's high love, low love, high expectations, and low expectations. So let's just touch on each one of those.
Yeah, so let's see. I guess the first one on here is we have low love and low expectations. So that's obviously not going to be very beneficial if we aren't loving and we aren't expecting much of other people, then that doesn't feel good.
Yeah, try and imagine with each of these what this person looks like. Can you think of someone in your life, or even just imagine fictitiously, what this person looks like? So that to me sounds like someone who just doesn't care about you.
Yeah, I think it's someone who's absorbed with their own life and their own things enough that they don't really care about other people.
Yeah, or at least this
specific person.
this one relationship. Yeah, it's just like, I don't love you and I don't have any expectations of you. That sounds like the person who's checking my groceries out, right? They don't care.
And I like that it says that it encourages deviance, because I think sometimes rebellion is a cry for help or a cry for attention. And so if someone doesn't care and you're trying to get their attention and you really want them to care, you might try to do something rebellious to get that attention.
Yeah. And I think that if you if it's not the grocery store person checking out your groceries, if it's your parent or if it's you and with your children, and you aren't treating them with much love, we all love our children, but if we're not treating them with much love and we're not holding them to any expectations, then we can see clearly how that would encourage deviance, right? So the next one is high expectations without love fosters rebellion. So there are two different words there, deviance and rebellion. But let's just try and imagine what that looks like as a person, a person with high expectations but low love.
Yeah, I think of someone like really harsh who has, I keep thinking of parenting examples, but a parent who's really strict on their kids but not very loving.
Yeah. I just immediately imagine like 1800s teachers, early 1900s using the paddle, whapping the kids on the butt, and it's like, it's high expectations, but anytime they make a mistake, they come down hard, but they don't actually seem to care about the student once again. Or in this example. The next one is high love but low expectations creates a feeling of fraternity but little progression. I think that's really interesting. Anna, you had a hairdresser you told me about that kind of touched on this idea.
I recently got my hair cut and
looks great.
My hairdresser was talking about moms and daughters and how she's seen a lot of her friends who try to be friends with their kids and how that backfires because it's just a different relationship. If you're trying to be your kid's friend, then you might be trying to do things that they like and you want them to like you. And yes, you love them, but you don't really have the expectations of them. Like, I don't expect my friends to do things for me, to do chores, to contribute, whatever. So it can lead to some difficulties in that sort of a situation. So that's what comes to mind for me with high love, but low expectation.
Yeah. I think we've all had some, especially as teenagers, can you think back to a teacher or like a youth leader or someone that was like an adult who was over teenagers and they were like super concerned about being cool and hip, and they were like, oh yeah, like totally cool. Like every student got an A, they were really chill. They just wanted to be that chill, cool. He gets it, like he gets being a teenager. And yet you look back and maybe loved those teachers at the time, right? Like, oh yeah, easy A, great. And then but you look back and it's like, how much did you learn in that class? How much did you learn in that group? How much did that person inspire you? How much do you think about that person now that you're an adult? I mean, and then there's this last example, which is high love and high expectations creates miracles, which I think you could also say changes lives.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, flip that and what would that look like?
I mean, I think of specific, like one of our professors even specifically.
Yeah, specific examples jump right to my mind.
Have challenged me and helped me see progress. And I knew that they loved me like the whole way. That's why they were helping me through, but they also challenged me. And I feel like with coaching that I do, one of the hardest things about being a coach is saying the truth. And sometimes people really need to hear it. And it can be hard to be the one to say it because they might not like it. But if you really, really love someone and you can be honest with them, that can change their life.
But what's amazing is that when you're doing it out of love and you have high expectations, if you do something and someone gets offended, or if you say something and they still decide to ignore your advice and they make big mistakes in their lives, I don't feel like you feel this horrible frustration that you feel when you have high expectations and low love, which I think, I'll just say it, I have definitely been that person. I think I tend to have high expectations and then I become very frustrated when people don't fulfill those expectations, and I become angry because I'm not treating that person with love. I could defend myself and argue that I do love them, but my actions are obviously saying otherwise, and my own feelings are saying otherwise. I'm angry with them, right? But when you actually love them and you believe in and trust them, even if they don't fulfill your expectations, You know that you said the right thing to them. You know you did the right thing in that moment. And I know the professor you're referring to. I want you to think, as you're listening to this podcast, think of someone in your life that had high love and high expectations. Think of a few. I think many of us have had a few people like that in our lives. It might be a parent or a grandparent or a close relative. It might be a teacher or a coach, but someone that, like, if that person came to you and needed something, the way they led, you'd die for that person. You'd take a bullet. We had an employer who was this way. He could be harsh in his notes. He could be very precise. He expected good work. And when he did, he was pretty relaxed. But whenever he came into the office and said, "Hey, you guys, I need this kind of performance today because of this particular circumstance," we were all like, "Oh yeah, we totally understand. Let's do it. We're there." I even remember one time he came in and said, I am experiencing a family crisis today. And I really need everyone to just be on their A game and be very responsive because I'm kind of emotionally moving through this thing right now. And he didn't really have, I don't think, the emotional capacity to corral or wrangle or whatever. But none of us felt like he was, in that moment, he had already established such a pattern of high love that when he stepped in and had a high expectation, we were all game. Mm-hmm. It really fostered our wanting to become the best that we could be and perform the best that we could for him because we knew he loved us and we loved him. There's many people, I think, that we can think of. And so, yeah.
And I think a great measure of if you are doing this or not yourself is this concept that that's called the manual, which basically is this idea that we have manuals for other people in our life. And it's like, here's what I expect you to do. You're supposed to buy me flowers on my birthday. You're supposed to be polite and say hi when I say hi to you, whatever. Manuals for strangers, manuals that we have for people who are close to us. It's the things that we just think are common sense or just everyone should know that. Everyone should follow that. And the problem with having a manual and having that kind of an expectation is that a lot of times we look at our manuals and we say, if you don't follow my manual for you, I am going to be upset. And we're not really punishing them as much as we're punishing ourselves because we're basing our own happiness on the behavior of other people. And when we do that, we just try to control the world. We try to control everybody because I can't feel good if you're not doing what I want you to be doing. And so we always try to encourage people you can have boundaries. That's a different thing. But having a manual is not helpful. So I always encourage people to drop the manual, to
throw it away.
Yeah, just, and it doesn't mean that you don't believe that people will be nicer, that they will achieve amazing things. It just means that their behavior is not the determining factor for your emotional well-being. And that's a way you can tell. Like if they can make their own choice and either way that they choose, whether it's the way you want them to or not, you're going to still believe in them and love them, then that I think is high love and high expectations. But if you're like, that makes me really mad or whatever you do really affects you, then you probably have a manual for that person.
Yeah. And if I can just extend this metaphor, and I think it's helpful actually. Mm-hmm. When I think of a manual, I think of a new electronics piece that I get, usually a camera. Cameras have these really extensive manuals. What is that manual for? It's to learn exactly how to input an instruction or some sort of signal and get an output from this camera, for example. But when we give someone a manual, what is it we're giving them a manual to? Our own emotions, our own feelings. Mm-hmm. We're giving them all the power and saying, here's all the buttons you push to make me happy. Here's all the buttons you push to make me frustrated. And these are my expectations of you. And if you want me to work, this is how you operate my emotions. And that's why we use this idiom, you're pushing my buttons. But we don't have buttons. And really...
And most people don't even know our manuals.
Yeah, no one knows our manuals. And you can create... As you were explaining this, Anna, I realized I can create manuals for people in 0 seconds. Like the moment I decide my kids should know exactly how to do this thing that I'm really exhausted of them not knowing how to do, that has become a manual for them. And they should know how to go to the bathroom all on their own. And they are old enough to have learned this by now. I've been teaching it to them for umpteen number of weeks.
Well, and even just like driving down the street in the car, you can have a manual for another driver.
How does that person not know that he was turning left? And if it's a tie, I go first. I have the right of way. Yeah. There actually is a driver's manual.
Well, and here's the thing. Manuals aren't fun. Like, no one wants to read a manual. No one wants to, like, read your manual.
Unless it's for a new camera.
You're basically encouraging them to try to be a people pleaser and try to do things for the wrong reasons. You know, not to do it because they actually want to do it, but to do it because they don't want you to get mad, or to do it because they don't want you to be sad. And basically you're kind of expecting them to regulate your emotions for you. And that's just not fun for anyone.
Yeah, I've done things for bosses because I didn't want to bum them out, or I didn't want them to get upset with me or disappointed. And I've done things for bosses because I felt like they actually cared about me, and I wanted to do it for that person because I cared about them. And so it's that thing we brought up in another episode. God cares more about his children wanting to do what's right than that they actually do what's right. And so what you were saying is that when you have these manuals for people, you're actually encouraging them to become people pleasers, meaning do what's right because I said so, not because you want to, instead of giving them the space to learn to want to do what's right for themselves. And that's just a leadership principle. And
it doesn't mean you can't say, like, you know, I would really love if you did this thing for me, but just don't base your happiness on if they do it or not. And I think that a lot of times in therapy, couples therapy, they will make the mistake. I think it's a mistake to have each spouse write down their manual basically for the other person. Like, here's all the things that I expect you to do, and we're going to try to meet each other's needs. What if you just tried to meet your own needs and then just loved the other person for being who they are, instead of expecting someone else to meet your needs, and they're not going to do a very good job at it, because not because they don't love you, but just because it's hard to meet other people's needs for them. And that leads to resentment. When we expect other people to meet our needs for us, that creates resentment.
Yeah. That doesn't mean there's no place for expectations. But if the expectation is coming from a place of us wanting the other person to fulfill our needs, then that's the wrong place. But if the expectation is coming from a place of, I love this person, whatever they decide to do, I'm emotionally okay, right? Like, I meet my own needs, but I believe in this person.
Yeah. Like, I keep using this flower example, even though it's really kind of a boring example.
Do you want me to buy you flowers?
No, I don't actually.
It's a passive aggressive sort of Freudian thing.
But I think a lot of people have some sort of expectation like that. Like, oh, it's Valentine's Day, you should buy me flowers or whatever.
The shoulds.
The shoulds. Yeah. Watch out for those shoulds. Those are manual things usually. And so if I did want that and I communicated it to you, actually, let's just say sushi, because that's what I would really want.
That is, yep.
Hey, Kent, I would really love it if you got me sushi for my birthday.
You've made that expectation clear.
But like, and I can say that, and he knows that about me, but I can also say, if he doesn't buy me sushi, I don't make that mean anything about me or my worth or my day. I know that I'm a valuable person and I like who I am without needing that from other people or needing him to do everything I ask him to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, this is a breakthrough I had very recently, I think, where I was thinking about like analyzing my own sense of frustration. I think frustration with other people is a really good key, that you can know that you're feeling an expectation that someone's not meeting, and you're giving them the power over your own emotions at that point. So when you're feeling frustration because of what someone else is doing or not doing, what are your expectations? What's your manual? And why do you have that expectation of them? If that expectation is so that they can fulfill a need for you, that's probably high expectations and low love, which is going to help you feel frustrated and them feel the need to rebel, or they just might not even be aware of your expectations. But if the why is because I realized this about myself. I said, what if I just changed the reason for this expectation and just said, I'm okay no matter what this person decides to do. I'm just going to love them. And then suddenly I felt no need for them to fulfill this expectation for me. And when I focused on loving them, that expectation was more likely to be met in almost any circumstance. And if it doesn't, that's okay. You have to truly relinquish your emotional sort of independence from that need, quote unquote, being met by that other person. Yeah. And it requires a lot of self-honesty to be able to do that.
Well, and that's something that we call emotional childhood or emotional adulthood. A lot of people are in emotional childhood without realizing it in the coaching world. And that just means that we are dependent still. A child is dependent, and that's okay. But we're dependent on other people for how we feel. And emotional adulthood is being able to choose how you feel, and that's independent of other people's behaviors.
Yeah, yeah. And that doesn't mean like you're this stoic, emotionless sort of...
No, of course not. Because sometimes you're going to still choose to feel sad. Like you can say, if you make that choice, I'm going to feel sad. But you know that it's not because of what they did or didn't do. It's because you're choosing to feel sad about that.
Yeah. And at the very least, you're taking ownership of those things. I have actually found that the better I get at doing this, and I'm not perfect at it yet, that bathroom example was very recent, like today. Me getting frustrated about whether or not my kid can use the bathroom on their own. I realized it just this evening. I was getting really frustrated, and I was like, man, I have to sit in here with her because if I leave her alone, she's either going to like take all the toilet paper and throw it all over the room. She's going to wash her hands for like 15 minutes and like waste tons of water. She'll never pull up her pants. Like, I don't know. It's just like, she's 3. And like
only barely.
Yeah. She just turned 3 and she's potty trained. It's amazing. Isn't that amazing? Isn't she amazing? Anyway, I think I was realizing I was frustrated about the 15 minutes of day I was losing. I didn't actually care about her and the fact that she was becoming potty trained and learning and growing. And as a 3-year-old, you're distracted by any numberless things, right? and so, yeah, I think, but my point there that I was going to make was, I don't think I feel like this sort of like emotionless, nebulous, you can't touch me kind of a thing floating through space and time. I actually feel more emotionally responsive in a very clean, pure way that I feel like I can own. And that makes me feel really good about myself. Like you were saying, you can choose to own your emotions and still feel them. But boy, love is a great emotion to choose to feel. And so if those are where your expectations are coming from, and you decrease all of that frustration in your life and you increase all of that love in your life, that's a happy way to live life. At least you're making a good trade, I think.
Well, and it's not just about being happy either. I think it's just, another term just to throw it out there is like clean pain versus dirty pain. And there's some emotions that are still painful, but they can feel cleansing. And so I think those are usually the ones that you choose. Like you would choose to feel that emotion in that situation. And so if someone you love dies, for example, it's going to feel really good to feel pain and grief, to mourn the death of someone you love. That's a clean pain versus like feeling guilty and feeling shame because you didn't say what you wanted to say before they died. That kind of stuff is more dirty pain. It's not really helping you, and it's probably not how you want to choose to feel. So yeah, that's maybe a tangent, but maybe,
but I still feel like it's a great trade. I'll trade frustration for love any day, to feel love over frustration any day. And so I want to just make this really quick and give a few examples just to try and paint this picture a little clearer. And this is all about film and family. So let's talk about film for a second. Think of being on set and think of the AD. That role has a lot of baggage, right? The first assistant director is in charge of, among many wonderful, important jobs, keeping the time. We got to make sure we know how many shots we've got today, how are we going to make our day, what's the schedule look like, where are we at, how far behind, how far ahead, and what do we got to do to finish and make our day. And so this first AD, we all have this stereotype is this guy walking around going, okay, guys, we got this much time, and okay, we're behind by this much, and okay, everyone, move it, move it, move it. And we have this this image of this person with high expectations and low love because they're just trying to run around set, cover their own butts, and make sure that they do everything they can to make sure everyone knows the schedule. And in the end, a lot of people have a lot of resentment towards the AD. But I think a lot of us have actually worked with, I'll speak for myself, ADs that are awesome. They're like one of the biggest champions of a film, and a great AD that really believes in the film and believes in the team working on that film, loves them, loves the story, loves the people. They're moving around and they're doing the same thing, essentially. I mean, they can do that job of making sure everyone knows the time, making sure everyone knows what they need to do to get, back on schedule. But they're kind of checking in with everyone. They're checking in to see what needs to happen. They're trying to keep an eye on the overall picture, logistically, so that they can be there for the director and help them find solutions to make sure that they get everything they need to make the film work. But it's all coming from this place of belief in the team, and I think that can apply to any department head and any crew member. If you are there because you're trying to make sure that you're getting your job done, you're thinking about yourself, your career, you're going to start feeling really frustrated. And I think we've all worked under department heads I've worked under department heads, and I know you have, Anna, where they get really frustrated with you if you're not doing everything exactly the way they want or fast enough, because nothing's ever fast enough on a film set. And we've also worked with people who really believe in us and believe in the project, and there's this just great unity and great movie making happens.
Yeah, I was going to say that I feel like when I have experienced one or the other, it's usually when we say high expectations, that's for the project, and the love is for the people that you're working with on the project. And so if you have high expectations but low love, maybe the project could turn out to be a really great product, but the process of making it was horrible. Yeah. Or the other way around, like maybe it was really fun to make the movie and there was a lot of love on set, but then you're not really proud of the finished product.
And I actually think that can often come from low expectations but high love. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. Like the department head who's hanging out with his crew and talking about movies while they're on set shooting a movie, which I've seen so many times, and it drives me crazy because I have these high expectations and I'm frustrated with them. So I should analyze that. But I do think it's funny. But that's not productive. That's not actually helping anyone. It's not helping you. It's not helping your crew. It's not helping the movie. But I mean, at least everyone's happy and they're friends, right?
Well, but again, the best is the combination of both, where you can love the process, love the product, love the people all the way through. High love and high expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's take another example, which is a marriage. So we're moving from film sets to marriages.
Back to family stuff. Yeah.
And so with marriage, often, I won't stereotype the husband or the wife, but think about your own marriage, if you're married. And there is often some expectations surrounding sex and your sex life.
This is a stereotype, but that's okay.
Well,
I mean, it's just a generalization.
Well, the husbands usually have certain expectations of wives. Mm-hmm. But I'm just saying, like, just think about your own marriage and think about your own dynamic. Everyone's marriages are a little different. And so I think that, remember, we're asking ourselves, where is this expectation coming from? So, for example, I really want my spouse to have sex with me, and I'm feeling frustrated. Okay, well, that probably shows that you're expecting your spouse to meet this need. And what that leads to is frustration. And a frustrated spouse is not a particularly attractive spouse, right? Like, so it's actually probably going to decrease the amount of intimacy happening in that marriage. But if you relinquish your spouse from that expectation in terms of meeting that need for you, but you just love them, then what happens is you actually feel totally independent in terms of, I don't need this specific thing to be done by my spouse for me to feel happy. I'm just going to love them anyway, no matter what they do. And then that's a very attractive thing. There's this independence and this love that you're getting from that spouse, and then usually the frequency and enjoyment of the sex life increases, right?
I mean, you definitely don't want to turn it into a job to be done. Like you said, to have someone managing your emotions for you, that they need to be helping your ego or something. And that's something that we see a lot with couples in their sex life.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then we've talked about parents and children, but I mean, think about some of the things like when you've gotten frustrated with your children and just turn back and say, okay, why was I feeling frustrated? What was the expectation I was really wanting them to fulfill? And why do I want them? And how can I just kind of own that and say, I'm going to be okay whether they do this or not? And then how do you turn that into love? How do you shift that? And this is going to require some creativity and but it's important to ponder it because, I think when we're feeling frustrated with people for not meeting our expectations, we're almost sealing the deal that they're not going to fulfill that expectation. But when we relinquish them from needing to fulfill our, not expectations, but our emotional needs, and taking the responsibility for our emotional needs upon ourselves, then we can maintain those expectations, but we can love them whether they do them or not. And that actually helps them feel like they have their own agency, because they do have their own agency.
Well, and this is the great paradox. It's this thing that I see all the time. And here's this quote that I was going to read by Andy Warhol. It says, the minute you stop wanting something, you get it. And it's this funny thing that I've always noticed. As soon as I become content with my life, you know, if I'm like wanting something so badly and having a hard time getting it, it's often like once I become content without it, that it happens. And when I'm wanting it so badly, I'm so desperate, you know, it doesn't really work out.
Yeah. I think I have so many examples of that being true since we've kind of come to terms with that idea. The more I look for them, the more I'm starting to see examples of that in my life. I can't even think of one right now, but boy, it's really true. And I want you to look out for that in your life.
I have an example.
Great.
When I was in high school, I remember wanting so badly to like be dating someone, and I was having crushes on everybody, and I don't know, I just like was always wanting that sort of a romance.
It's true. I didn't know Anna in high school at all. We didn't know we existed, each other. We knew we ourselves existed. Anyway, we hadn't met. and anyway, so since being married, I've read just a small sampling of some of her high school journals.
Yeah, well, that is where
and she let it out, man.
That's where I let it out.
She was crushing.
Yep. Fun days, but
I think they weren't that fun for me. But
I think once I kind of got over that, it was just a little like, okay, I can enjoy high school. I don't have to be dating as much. Like, I started to have a lot more fun with dating, and I started to have guys be interested in me that I didn't expect, and was actually really surprised by. I was like, wait, what is happening? This is so weird. But it wasn't until I could kind of relinquish that strong desperation, because, you know, like you said, that's not very attractive when we're like, please.
Yeah, but it's not a guarantee that it'll happen. What if it hadn't happened?
What hadn't happened?
Tons of guys started asking you on dates, or like even surprising guys.
Like, even though I didn't think that anyone could tell, I think that they can. Like,
yeah.
I think people can tell when you're kind of desperate, or when you're fulfilling your own needs, and it's an attractive thing. And it's not just, that's not the only example of how this applies, but
that reminds me of a guy who gave a lot of talks, named John, by the way. And he talks about what I wish I'd known when I was single is a talk he gives. And he talks about a cartoon of a girl sitting in her college dorm, and she has this poster on it, and she's written, yearly goals, get married. Monthly goals, get married. Daily goals, get married. And he says, and she's just sitting there. And it's this idea of like, when that is like your desperate focus in life, it's actually really unlikely to get happening, like to happen. But like a young man or a young woman who knows what they want out of life, and they're getting an education, and they're applying for jobs, and they're, being really nice to people. I don't know. And they treat people without like this instant expectation of like, oh my gosh, like, is this the one? And they're just meeting people and being friendly, and they have lots of friends, and that's an attractive person. You're like, wow, this person's going somewhere, and maybe I want to go along with them, and I can ask them out on a date or whatever. And so, yeah, it's interesting how like it does once you've shifted, and that can be hard. Sometimes that can be really hard because sometimes you feel like you really do need something, and that's the only way you'll ever be happy. But those people sometimes also burn out. The people who are like, I must make feature films for a living or I'll never be happy, are the ones who also, it's like La La Land when she says, I can't go to that audition because it will hurt too much. Like, can't face one more rejection because I just can't keep trying because the trying hurts, because she has this emotional expectation for someone to give her a role. But then once we actually do like relinquish that, anyway, I think we've beat this horse dead,
yeah, I think.
But it's a hard thing to do sometimes, is really let go. And yet it's sort of magical.
Well, and I don't want to say that so that you feel stuck. Like, the only way I can have this is to stop wanting it, and I can't stop wanting it. I think it's just to realize that sometimes our desires are here to teach us something. And sometimes it's to teach us how to be happy without the things that we think will bring us happiness.
Yeah. Do we really need them? We can choose to want them and still choose to be emotionally fulfilled.
Mm-hmm.
That's a much better place to be coming from. Even if it's a dream, I can have a dream and find joy in pursuing it. And if it happens, I mean, I believe I have many hopes and many dreams, and I believe that they will happen, but I don't need them to happen before I let myself feel happy. Because I can feel happy now with my current circumstances.
And that's one of the best lessons you can learn, I think, is just to be, not to be happy all the time necessarily, but to be able to feel satisfied where you're at.
Yeah,
and
contentment.
Wherever that is.
Yeah, and so I feel like we've shifted a little bit from like expectations of other people to expectations with ourselves or our lives or the universe or whatever. But hopefully these have been some powerful principles to think about and to consider about when do we use expectations and how do we use them, and when do we keep them and when do we drop them. And I think that there's some sort of a synthesis of some of these easy, quick ideas, which is we shouldn't have expectations of anyone, or we should have expectations and those are going to somehow change people. There's some nuance and there's some higher theories that we've tried to touch on today. Thanks so much for listening to this episode, and we really appreciate you tuning in. We love recording these, and please feel free to email us with questions or podcast ideas or comments at films@invisiblemansion.com.
Thanks for joining us. We'll
Bye.
see you next time. If you think you're ready to take the things you're learning on this podcast to the next level, then I want to invite you to join our Film and Family program, or at least check it out. In the program, you'll get one-on-one private coaching with me every week. I'm going to teach you these tools in depth and how they apply to you and your situation. Then after you graduate, alumni receive ongoing lifetime support within our community, as well as access to any courses we publish absolutely free. It's also risk-free. You either get the results you want, or I'll give you your money back. Check it out at invisiblemansion.com/film and family.